In Rockport's winter harbor, a distant buoy bell and wind at the eaves soften the night. This coastal sleep story for adults is told in a slow, steady voice, so you can relax and drift toward sleep. The night finds you standing at the edge of a quiet harbor street, breath soft in the cold, watching your own exhale curl into the air and vanish. The sky is a deep, steady dark, the kind that settles in early and doesn't hurry anywhere. Somewhere out on the water, a buoy bell sounds now and then, a single calm note drifting in over the roofs. Wind moves along the eaves of the cottages, carrying the faint scent of salt and snow-packed sidewalks. Light spills from the front window of the place that's waiting for you. A small cottage with weathered siding and a low roofline. The kind of house that looks as if it knows long winters and quiet nights very well. Your hand finds the doorknob, metal chilled from the air, and you step inside. The door closes with an easy thud, shutting out the sting of the wind. In here, the warmth is gentle, not hot, just enough to soften the feeling in your fingers. A radiator or baseboard heater gives off a low hum along one wall, and the air feels slightly dry and safe. You can hear the faint whistle of the wind at the roofline, but it's distant now, like a sound from another life. For a moment, you simply stand there in the entry, letting your shoulders notice that you're no longer outside. Go ahead and let them drop a little. Take a slow breath in through your nose, filling up the space behind your ribs, and let it move all the way down toward your belly. Hold it just for a heartbeat, then let it slip out in a long, unhurried exhale through your mouth. You don't have to do anything clever with the breath. Just let it be simple. In and out. As you breathe, your fingers twist free of your gloves, and you feel the difference between the chilled fabric and the comfortably warm air of the room. Your bag slides from your shoulder to a spot by the wall, landing with a soft, forgiving sound on the rug. Keys find their way into a shallow dish on a small table by the door. Coat unbuttons one slow movement at a time, the fabric brushing against your clothes with a muted swish. You can feel how the weight of the day has been clinging to you in small, almost invisible ways, and how each little action, placing something down, unfastening a button, loosening a collar, lets a little more of that weight drain away. This is the place where you get to set things down, both the objects in your hands and the thoughts you've been carrying. Take another breath, even slower than the first. Let the air come in gently, not all at once, and notice the mild warmth as it passes through your nose. Let your jaw unclench just a touch. When you exhale this time, imagine the sound of the wind at the eaves helping to carry the breath away, like it's lifting a few stray worries off your shoulders and up into the night. If you like, you can let your eyes close for a moment while you do it, just to feel the difference between inside and outside more clearly, between being on the way somewhere and finally having arrived. When you open them again, the cottage is waiting in its own soft way. To your left, a small living room opens up, lit by a single lamp on a side table. The shade throws a mellow cone of light over a couch with a thick blanket folded along the back, and a low table where a book lies face down, saving a page for when you feel like reading. The hardwood floor shows a faint shine where the lamplight reaches it, and the rest of the room fades into comfortable shadow. There's no rush to explore everything at once. The room seems to understand that you'll get to it all in your own time. Behind you, the door is solid and sure, a simple lock now turned into place. Through a small pane of glass, you can see the vaguest suggestion of the harbor street, just enough to know it's there, not enough to tug at you. Another muted chime of the buoy bell slips in through the walls, softer now, like it's passing by at a distance rather than calling for your attention. The cottage keeps the world at a gentle distance, letting the sea and the town be something you can visit when you want, but not something that demands anything of you tonight. You slip out of your boots and feel the give of the rug under your feet, thick and slightly rough, a comforting texture after the hard cold of the sidewalk. One boot, then the other, lined up neatly by the door, ready for tomorrow, but not needed now. It's a small act, placing them side by side, but it signals something important. No more hurrying, no more stepping from one obligation straight into the next. You've reached the place where the night is allowed to be as slow as it wants to be. As you move farther into the room, your body begins to understand what your mind is just starting to believe, that there is nothing urgent waiting for you here. No one expecting anything. No deadlines tucked under the couch. No conversations hanging unfinished in the air. Only this quiet harbor cottage, with its steady warmth and its soft lamplight, offering you a chance to let the day loosen its grip. For now, it's enough just to be here, breathing in and out, feeling the difference between the cold you left outside and the snug, winter-safe space you've stepped into. The living room gathers itself around you in gentle, familiar shapes. Lamplight pools on the braided rug, catching the muted blues and tans woven into its circles, colors that feel like sea and sand toned down for night. A small couch sits close enough to the window that you could lean back and still see the harbor if you wanted to, its cushions softened by years of quiet evenings. A thick knit blanket lies across the back, the kind of wool that promises to be a little scratchy at first, and then exactly right once it warms with your body heat. Somewhere in the wall, the heating system sighs, and you can feel a faint line of warmth rising along the baseboard. Beyond the glass, the harbor district rests under the kind of cold that doesn't need to prove anything. Snow from earlier in the week has been pushed against the curbs and along the edges of the wharf, where it has crusted and glazed slightly in the freezing air. The water itself is dark and dense, moving in slow, heavy swells that bump gently against the sides of the tied-up boats. Along the inner edges, thin lacework of ice clings to the pilings, not thick enough to cover the bay, just enough to remind you how low the temperature has settled. Each time a small swell lifts, the ice shifts with a quiet, crystalline creak you can only imagine from inside. Every so often, that distant buoy bell speaks again, one clear note drifting in over the harbor like a simple reassurance that the water is still out there and the markers are still in place. The sound reaches the cottage, softened by distance and walls, more suggestion than insistence. Wind moves along the eaves and over the roof, making a soft, steady brushing noise that never quite rises above a murmur. When a stronger gust comes, the old glass in the window gives a light rattle, a familiar little tremor that settles almost as soon as it begins, as if the house itself is taking a breath and letting it go. Inside, the air smells faintly of dry heat, old wood, and the light trace of something clean, maybe the soap used to wash the floors, maybe a recently laundered blanket. There's the subtlest hint of salt in the background, not sharp, just a reminder that the sea is close, even when you can't hear it directly. When you rub your palms together, skin feels a little tight from the cold outside, and then a little looser as the warmth here has time to sink in. The arm of the couch is smooth under your fingers, fabric worn just enough to feel comfortable, not tired. The walls are painted a soft, off-white that catches the lamplight and holds it gently instead of bouncing it back. In some places, you can see the faint outline of the boards beneath, straight vertical lines that tell you this house has been standing here for more than a few winters. A simple framed print hangs above the couch. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet shoreline scene in muted colors that echo the ones under your feet. A small shelf near the corner holds a handful of books with spines turned out, ready for whatever kind of night you feel like having pages, or just the comfort of knowing they're there. The floorboards carry their own story, each step giving back a small, honest creak as you move through the room. Not loud, not startling, just enough to remind you that the house is real and solid and here with you. A low table sits in front of the couch, its surface bearing the faint rings of old cups, proof that warm drinks have been rested here many nights before. A simple lamp on the side table holds the center of the room's light. Beyond its reach, corners fade into soft shadow where your eyes don't feel the need to follow. Near the far wall, an opening leads into a compact kitchen area, visible from where you stand. There's an enamel sink under another window, its edges rounded with age, and a row of cabinets with plain wooden doors. A kettle sits on the stovetop, still and patient, not yet called into service tonight. Mismatched mugs hang from small hooks beneath a shelf, shapes and glazes hinting at different histories but sharing the same purpose now. The countertop is clear, except for a small jar with a few spoons in it and a folded dish towel with faint stripes. A narrow hallway stretches away from the living room, lit by a single overhead fixture with a frosted shade that turns the light soft and hazy. At the end of that hall, a doorway opens onto a bedroom where you can just make out the edge of a quilt spread over the bed, pieced together in quiet colors. The pillows are piled a little higher than strictly necessary, an invitation to sink in and not think about sitting up straight for a while. A simple wooden chair sits near the far window, its back turned slightly, as if someone rose from it slowly not long ago and stepped away toward sleep. Closer to you, by the main window in the living room, a deep windowsill offers a kind of resting place between inside and outside. The paint there bears faint marks of seasons past, small chips, a thin hairline crack that runs along the edge, places where sunlight has faded the color just a bit. On the glass, you can see a light haze where the warm interior air meets the cold just beyond. If you bring your hand near, the pane feels cool, though not as biting as the air outside. From this spot, if you leaned forward, you could watch the harbor lights through the breath of your own reflection. Here and there, the cottage gives away more small details the longer you look. A pair of heavy curtains is gathered back at the sides of the window, ready to be drawn when you decide the night has been seen enough. A basket in the corner holds a couple of folded throws and an extra pillow. On the wall near the door, a row of simple pegs holds your coat now, alongside an empty space that suggests you're the only one expected tonight. The quiet is complete but not lonely. It feels like a kind of agreement between you and the house and the winter harbor beyond the glass, that for this night, everything is allowed to be exactly this calm. From the safety of this room, with the outside world wrapped in cold and the inside wrapped in light, you can feel yourself starting to map the space without even trying. Where the couch is, where the hallway leads, where the kettle waits, each detail settles into place in your mind like pieces of a gentle puzzle, not demanding any effort, just revealing themselves. And as you take it all in, the harbor bell sounds again, faint and sure, as if it's marking not the passage of time, but the deepening of the quiet that's gathering around you. You let your gaze soften, not fixing on anything in particular, just letting the room gather quietly around you. The lamplight rests on the braided rug at your feet, and you feel a small tug of invitation from the couch when you move toward it. Each step presses gently into the fabric underfoot, the floorboards giving a faint, honest reply. Your body understands the hint before your mind does. You're allowed to be heavy here. You ease down onto the couch, feeling the cushions lift to meet you. There's a brief moment where your muscles brace out of habit, waiting to hold you up, and then they realize they don't have to. The seat gives just enough, cradling your hips and thighs. The back of the couch supports the length of your spine. As you lean back, your shoulder blades settle one at a time, like books sliding into place on a shelf. The tension across the tops of your shoulders loosens a little, then a little more. The blanket along the back of the couch is within reach. When your fingers find it, the wool feels thick and slightly textured, a little rough at first touch, then softer as your hands close around it. You draw it down over your legs and lap, its weight surprisingly reassuring. Each fold lies across you like a calm statement. Here, for tonight, is where you belong. The fabric traps pockets of warmth near your skin, and the contrast between the cooler air on your face and the cozy heat building under the blanket makes you more aware of your own shape, your own outline. Your feet stretch out along the rug, toes wiggling slightly inside your socks. The rug pushes back with a firm, steady cushion, the woven strands just noticeable under the fabric. You can feel where the rug ends and the bare floor begins. There's a subtle drop in temperature, a shift in texture, as if the house is reminding you where its edges are. When you move your feet lazily side to side, the sound is soft and muted, a small, steady rustle that matches your slower breathing. Your chest rises and falls without effort now. Breath comes in, cool at the tip of your nose, and travels down until your ribs widen just enough to feel. When you exhale, your body sinks a fraction deeper into the cushions, like a ship settling into a safe harbor. Your jaw loosens, tongue resting comfortably against the back of your teeth. Even your hands, often so busy, begin to rest more naturally in your lap, fingers uncurling from the shapes of keys and straps and lists that they've been holding all day. After a while, a quiet thought forms. A warm drink would feel good in your hands. The idea isn't urgent. It just drifts through you like the distant sound of the buoy bell outside. You sit with it for a moment, noticing how the idea itself makes your palms almost anticipate heat, how your throat imagines the gentle path of something warm traveling downward. When you're ready, you ease the blanket from your lap, letting the fabric slide away in a slow, unhurried fold. Standing up, you notice the way your legs feel slightly heavier than before, pleasantly grounded instead of tired. You move toward the kitchen, the edge of the rug brushing your ankles as you step off onto the bare floor. The boards here are cooler, and your soles feel the difference right away. The slight chill isn't uncomfortable. It simply reminds you that outside the walls, the night is truly cold, while in here, the warmth you're about to make is entirely yours. At the counter, your hand finds the kettle's handle. The metal is room temperature cool, smooth under your fingers, neither heavy nor light. You lift it and feel the subtle sway of the remaining water inside, a gentle suggestion rather than a slosh. When you turn the tap, water flows in a soft stream, echoing lightly in the sink as the kettle fills. The sound is steady and friendly, adding a simple rhythm to the quiet room. You turn the tap off, and the water's hush fades, leaving the faint ringing in the metal as it settles. Setting the kettle on the stove, you turn the knob until you hear the low click and the barely audible hum that follows. The handle is still cool, but as the minutes pass, you know warmth will travel through metal and water and steam until it reaches your hands. While you wait, you lean your palms on the counter's edge. The surface is smooth and slightly cool, the edge pressing gently into the heels of your hands. Your arms bear a bit of your weight, elbows soft, shoulders rounding forward in a comfortable curve. Your eyes find the small collection of tea packets and tins near the stove. Your fingers move through them, carding gently, the paper and cardboard whispering against your skin. When you select the peppermint tea, the faint scent meets you even before you open the wrapper, a clean, bright smell that feels like cool air in summer, but arrives now in the middle of winter, ready to be warmed. A cinnamon stick waits in a small jar nearby, its surface ridged and dry. When you lift it out, it taps lightly against the glass, then rests across your palm, light as a twig. The kettle begins to respond, first with a soft shifting inside, then with a faint, building murmur. You watch as a thin ribbon of steam slips from the spout, curling upward and vanishing into the kitchen's quiet air. The sound never becomes harsh or insistent, just a gentle sigh that lets you know the water is ready. You wrap your hand around the handle again, feeling a trace of warmth there now, and pour the water into a waiting mug. The stream falls in a steady, clear line, hitting the peppermint leaves and cinnamon stick with a muted hiss. The scent rises almost immediately, cool mint turning soft and velvety in the heat, cinnamon deepening into something round and comforting. You wrap both hands around the mug, fingers meeting on the far side. The ceramic is almost hot, but not quite, inviting you to adjust your grip until it feels just right. Heat begins to seep into your palms, then your fingers, then the backs of your hands, and from there it spreads up your wrists, along your forearms, and all the way to your shoulders. For a moment, you simply stand there, holding the mug, feeling its gentle weight and warmth. Your shoulders lower another fraction, as if the heat in your hands is quietly loosening the last knots at the base of your neck. You take a slow sip, the steam brushing your upper lip, the edge of the mug smooth against your skin. The tea is warm but not scalding, the peppermint bright and clean on your tongue, the cinnamon adding a soft, sweet depth that lingers as you swallow. Carrying the mug back toward the living room, you walk a little slower than before, mindful of the liquid moving with each step. The small sway of the tea inside becomes another subtle reminder of your own pace, unhurried, steady. The blanket is waiting for you when you return to the couch. You sit down carefully, the cushions rising to meet you again, and drape the blanket over your legs once more. This time, as you settle, the warmth from the mug in your hands and the warmth under the wool meet somewhere in your middle, and you feel yourself arrive more fully in your own body, grounded and present in this snug harbor room. You rest with the mug for a while, fingers cradling its familiar curve, breath mingling with the soft rise of steam. Each sip moves through you in a quiet line, warming the inside of your chest and easing a path down to your stomach. The peppermint clears a gentle space in your mind, while the cinnamon settles warmly at the center of you, like a small ember that glows without needing to flare. Around you, the room waits patiently, every object content to stay where it is until you're ready to notice it. When your eyes wander, they begin close by. The lamplight glows against the side table, tracing the faint grain in the wood. A coaster sits there with the faint ring of past cups, the history of other quiet nights resting in circles barely darker than the surrounding surface. The lampshade, simple and pale, softens the light so that nothing in the room feels harsh or too bright. Shadows gather in the corners, not as something to be wary of, but as soft pockets where the day can disappear without a sound. Beyond the couch, the window draws your gaze. The pane reflects your outline faintly, layered over the scattered harbor lights outside. You can see the shapes of boats at their moorings, rocking so slowly that it almost feels imagined. A low wharf lies along the shoreline, its planks dusted with old snow, the edges dark where the tide has touched and retreated. The faint suggestion of small dories is visible in the dim light rounded bows, ropes leading away to cleats, hulls resting easy in the black water. Every so often, a light from some distant house or dock flickers, but nothing demands your attention for long. The distant buoy bell offers another calm note, gliding across the water to reach the cottage walls. It's a single, rounded sound, not loud enough to startle, just enough to remind you of the world beyond this window. As the note fades, the wind brushes along the eaves again. A soft, sustained motion, like a hand passing over the roof. You can almost imagine the shingles, weathered and steady, fitted close together against years of coastal winters. You take another slow sip of tea, then set the mug carefully on the low table. The ceramic touches down with a small, solid sound. For a moment, you simply sit and trace the feeling in your fingers where the heat still lingers. Then you slip your hands free of the blanket and stand. This time, when you move, it's not out of any need to do anything in particular. It's more like drifting. You follow whatever your eyes or your curiosity suggest, letting your steps be guided by small details. Your first stop is the window. Standing closer, you see the faint crystallization along the lower edge of the glass where the cold has pressed in. It looks like tiny, delicate ferns etched into the pane, or like the memory of waves captured in frost. You lift your hand and hover it just above the surface. The chill comes through, cool against your palm, another reminder of how well the room holds the warmth around you. On the sill itself, the paint shows its age in the best way, slightly worn where hands have set down objects over the years. A hairline crack tracing one corner like a thin, pale river. On one end of the sill rests a small, pale piece of wood. At first, it almost blends into the painted surface, but as you look more closely, you see its curves, the way its surface has been smoothed by water and time. When you pick it up, it's lighter than it looks, dry and faintly cool to the touch. The grain swirls in soft lines, and there are small, worn hollows where once there were knots or sharper edges. Holding it in your hand, you can feel how the sea has shaped it. No splinters, no harsh corners, just a gentle, polished feel as your thumb glides along it. You turn the driftwood slowly, feeling how it fits into your palm, how the curve seems to nestle against the base of your fingers as if it has been waiting to be held. There's the faintest trace of salt and old shoreline when you bring it near your face. Not strong, just enough to suggest long days washed in and out with the tide. You don't need to think about where it came from or how it ended up here. It's enough to know that it carries some quiet memory of the water outside, now resting safely inside these walls. When you set it back down, you choose a spot halfway along the sill where the lamplight can reach it. You place it carefully, laying it so that its natural curve faces inward, as if it's turning toward the room rather than away. Under the light, its pale surface catches a soft glow, the wood's gentle curves emphasized without any fuss. It becomes one small point of calm in the line of the windowsill, something your eyes can return to later without needing to think about it too much. From the window, your attention drifts toward a small writing table tucked against the wall near the hallway. Its top is clear except for a shallow wooden tray and a stack of folded papers. The chair in front of it is pulled in, legs resting solidly on the floorboards. You step over, drawn by the quiet geometry of it all, the rectangle of the table, the vertical lines of the chair back, the stack of papers sitting just slightly askew. In the tray lies another object that catches your eye. You lift it out carefully and realize it's an old map. Folded into a tidy bundle, the paper feels thicker than modern sheets, with a faint roughness along the edges where it has been opened and closed many times. When you ease the folds apart, the map opens with a soft whisper. Lines of coastline unfurl under your fingertips, inked in fine strokes that mark inlets, points, and coves. Tiny symbols show soundings and channels, while faint names label the harbor and the outer waters. You smooth the map gently with your palms, pushing out the crease that runs down the middle. The paper holds a slight curve where it has been folded for so long, but it relaxes under your touch. You can feel the raised impressions where the ink has sunk into the fibers, almost like braille of tides and depths and distant shoals. The colors are muted, soft browns, faded blues, a faint wash of green in a few places. It smells faintly of old paper and a hint of something mineral, like dried salt. Rather than refold it, you let it rest open on the table. You slide it slightly so that one edge aligns with the table's lip, the rest stretching back toward the wall. In this position, you can glance at it as you pass, see the curve of the harbor and the scatter of tiny islands without needing to stand over it. With your fingertips at the corners, you flatten it once more, feeling the air slip out from beneath as it settles. The map becomes another quiet presence in the room, a gentle reminder of the water just beyond the houses and docks. You step back a little and look at the space you've just moved through the window, with its small piece of driftwood now resting in the lamplight, the table with the open harbor map waiting calmly on its surface. Neither object demands anything of you. They simply mark the room with their shapes and textures, small anchors that tie the inside and outside worlds together in a soft, wordless way. For a moment, you let yourself be completely still. Your hands hang loosely at your sides, fingers resting in a natural curve. The air in the room feels comfortably warm against your face, slightly cooler near the window, perfectly ordinary and completely soothing. Somewhere behind you, the heating system sighs and then pauses. The kettle on the stove ticks faintly as it continues to cool. A wall clock, so quiet you almost forgot it was there, offers a gentle, steady tick-tock, measuring time in the smallest possible increments. Outside, the buoy bell sounds again, one clear note carried over the dark water. Between that sound and the clock's soft ticking, there's a stretch of silence that doesn't feel empty at all. It feels full of breath, of wooden beams and painted walls, of harbor air and knitted wool, and the lingering warmth of tea. Standing there in that pause, with the driftwood resting on the sill and the old map smoothed out on the table, you feel the room, the night, and your own body all settling into the same unhurried rhythm, as if everything has quietly agreed to move at the pace of the tide. For a while, you simply breathe in that shared rhythm, feeling your body, the room, and the quiet night beyond the glass, all moving together at a slow, even pace. Your hands rest easily at your sides, the skin on your fingers, still remembering the texture of old paper and water-smoothed wood. The driftwood sits where you placed it on the sill, and the unfolded harbor chart rests on the table, a calm map of lines and curves. Nothing in the space is waiting to be fixed. It all just is. As your eyes move along the window ledge, they catch on a small, simple thing that seems to invite the softest kind of attention. At the far end of the sill, tucked into the shadow near the frame, sits a shallow bowl made of pale ceramic. You hadn't really noticed it before. It had blended into the scenery, like part of the house. Now, as you step closer, you see what rests inside it. Seashells, a small handful, gathered and left here the way someone might leave a handful of coins or buttons by the door. They're all shapes and sizes, some ridged and spiraled, some smooth and flat, some chipped just enough to show they've had their own long journeys. You ease the bowl out into the lamplight, careful not to clink anything too loudly. The ceramic is cool and firm against your palms, its edges thin but strong. Inside, the shells shift with a soft, dry sound, like the smallest possible version of waves rolling over pebbles. You set the bowl on the sill in front of you, close enough that you can study each piece without leaning. There is no list, no instruction. Only the quiet idea that you might give them a bit more room, a bit more space to be seen. You slide one finger through the shells until it finds a small, scalloped one with faint stripes of pink and cream. Its ridges press gently into your skin as you lift it, the underside smooth and slightly cool. You turn it over once or twice, noticing a tiny chip along one side where the edge is softer. Then, without really planning it, you place it on the windowsill to the left of the bowl, close to the glass. It makes the faintest tap as it meets the painted wood, a sound so small it almost feels like a thought instead of a noise. Another shell follows. This one is longer and more narrow, shaped like a spiral, with a tip that has been worn blunt by tumbling against sand and stone. Its surface is a pale tan, with thin lines spiraling around it like the memory of tides. You place it a little distance from the first shell, not in a straight line, not in any strict pattern, just where it feels right. The lamp catches on its curves, throwing a soft highlight along one side, leaving the other in gentle shadow. You move unhurriedly, letting your hand drift between the bowl and the sill. A small, rounded shell the color of weathered bone. A flatter, fan-shaped one with faint purple at the edges. A tiny fragment that must once have been part of something larger, now smoothed into its own simple shape. With each shell you pick up, you notice something different. The weight, the temperature against your skin, the way one edge is smoother than the other. You place them on the windowsill one by one, listening to the faint taps and rests as they settle into place. There is no right order, no wrong sequence. Sometimes you group two shells close together because their colors seem to belong side by side. Sometimes you leave a bit of space between them so the painted wood shows through, soft and pale under the lamplight. A few pieces end up nearly in a row. Others form a loose curve, echoing the shape of the harbor outside. If your mind tries to name it or call it a pattern, you let the thought drift away again, the way a bit of foam slides back into the waves. In the corner of your eye, you can still see the pale curve of the driftwood resting where you left it, and the map spread out on the small table, but they stay where they are, content in their quiet roles. Your focus is on the shells, on the small, chalky grains that cling to your fingertips now and then, on the way the cool air by the glass makes each piece feel just a little colder at first touch. You notice how some shells rock slightly when you set them down, then find their balance and become still. You pause now and then, letting your hand rest on the edge of the sill while you look at what you've done so far. The line of shells isn't perfectly straight, and it doesn't need to be. It looks a bit like a thought that has been allowed to wander and then gently come to rest. The lamplight spills over them in a soft slope, picking out the ridges and grooves, the tiny pits and worn places that tell you they've been carried and shaped by water for a long time before finding their way here. Your body relaxes into the rhythm of the task. Hand to bowl, fingers searching lightly, hand to sill, shell set down. Breath in, breath out. The sounds that reach you from outside weave into this small pattern, the distant bell on the water offering a single clear note now and then, the hum of the heating system, the occasional faint rustle of wind at the eaves. Each shell becomes a marker of a moment, a small pause where your full attention rests on something simple and harmless. Eventually, the bowl grows lighter. You reach your fingers in and find only a few pieces left. Scattered across the bottom, you pick them up one at a time, letting each find its place on the sill, one in a tiny gap, one just beyond the drift of the others, one tucked a little closer to the frame. When the bowl is finally empty, you hold it in both hands for a moment, feeling the bare ceramic, now without the soft, shifting weight of the shells. It feels clean, light, and done. You set the bowl back toward the corner of the sill, where it began, only now it holds nothing at all. In front of it, the seashells stretch along the ledge in an easy, meandering line. There are small spaces between some, almost touching in other places, like a gentle shoreline made of tiny, quiet things. The arrangement doesn't announce itself. It simply feels a little more open, a little more intentional than before, as if you've smoothed a wrinkle out of the room without changing anything important. You lean your hands on the sill and let your gaze follow the shells from one end to the other. The sequence has no story to tell, no message to deliver. It is just a set of shapes and textures that you have agreed to notice. As you stand there, your shoulders level and easy, the simple act of having placed these small pieces in a soft order leaves a calm aftertaste, like the feeling of tidying a drawer or folding a blanket. You didn't need to do it. But now that it's done, the room seems to breathe a little easier, and so do you. After a time, you let your gaze drift from the line of shells. They stay where you've placed them, a quiet border between the room and the night outside. The glass above them holds a thin film of condensation, reminding you how cold the air is just beyond the wall. The clock behind you keeps its soft count of moments, each tick matching the easy rise and fall of your breath, until a simple thought arrives. Another cup of something warm would feel good, a small ceremony at the edge of the night. You straighten slowly, feeling the fabric of your clothes shift against your skin, and turn from the window. The couch waits in its pool of lamplight. The map rests on the table. The driftwood keeps its pale place on the sill. You move past them toward the kitchen, letting them soften into the background. Your footsteps carry you off the rug and onto the bare floor. The boards are faintly cool under your soles. In the kitchen, the light is a touch brighter, but still gentle, spreading from a small fixture over the sink. Counters run in a simple line along the wall. A compact stove sits under a short-range hood, and the kettle waits on a back burner. You lift it, feel its lighter weight, and turn the tap. Water splashes quietly into metal, the sound rounded and steady in the shallow basin. The faucet handle is cool under your fingers, the sink bearing the faint scratches of everyday use. You set the kettle back on the burner and turn the knob until you hear the soft click and low rush that mean heat is on its way. The new sound joins the hum of the refrigerator and the faint buzz of the overhead light. While the water warms, you open the cabinet where the mugs live. Hinges give a tiny creak as the door swings outward. Inside, a short row of cups waits in mismatched shapes and colors. You choose one that fits your hand easily, its handle wide enough for your fingers, its ceramic cool and smooth. On the counter, a small tin and a box hold your tea. Wrappers and lids make a soft crackle as you open them. The scent of peppermint rises right away, clean and bright. From a glass jar, you take a single cinnamon stick, its edges curled and ridged under your fingertips. It taps lightly against the side of the mug as you set it in. The kettle begins to murmur. You wrap your hand around the handle. The metal is warm now. When you tilt the kettle, water pours in a smooth line into the waiting mug, hitting the tea with a soft hiss. Leaves darken and curl. The cinnamon rises and settles. Steam lifts from the surface of the cup in slow, curling wisps, rising into the cooler air and fading. You pause to watch it. The aroma gathers around you, peppermint clear and cool, cinnamon warm and round, blending into one steady, comforting scent. Both hands curl around the mug, fingers meeting on the far side. Heat presses into your palms and moves along your wrists, easing the last bits of tension from your forearms and shoulders. For a moment, you do nothing but stand there, breathing and feeling the solid weight of the cup. When you take the first sip, you move slowly. The liquid is hot, but gentle, rolling over your tongue. Peppermint arrives first, then cinnamon follows, leaving a light warmth at the back of your throat. The heat travels downward in a calm line and settles low in your chest. You take another sip, then another, with small pauses between. In those pauses, you simply hold the mug under your chin and breathe in the steam. The refrigerator hums behind you, the tile under your feet cool and smooth. Each small detail, the feel of the handle, the faint shift of the cinnamon stick inside the cup, the way the steam curls past your cheek keeps you gently anchored in this unhurried moment. After a while, you carry the mug back toward the living room. The change from tile to wood underfoot is subtle but clear. The lamplight ahead looks softer now, blurred a little by the faint haze above your drink. The shells on the windowsill glimmer in their new arrangement, and beyond them the harbor lights shimmer on the dark water. You settle once more onto the couch, the blanket drawing over your legs in a familiar fold, and wrap your fingers around the mug again. You rest the cup lightly against your chest for a moment, feeling its warmth seep through fabric and skin. Outside, the buoy bell offers a single, distant note, and the wind grazes the eaves in a long, quiet stroke. Inside, the only movements are the slow rise and fall of your breath and the easy settling of your body into the cushions. The day feels farther away now, resting somewhere beyond the frozen harbor and dark streets, while you sit here in this snug cottage, wrapped in heat and stillness, letting the edge of wakefulness soften a little more with each quiet moment. You sit very still, the mug settled in both hands again, the blanket draped over your legs as if it has known that shape for years. The tea has cooled a little. When you tilt the cup and take a sip, the warmth is gentle now, not urgent, just enough to glide down and rest quietly at the center of you. Steam rises in thinner strands, almost invisible unless you watch for it. Your breath joins it, moving in and out in a pace that has become its own soft answer to the night. A small thought appears, quiet as a whisper. This is enough. It doesn't arrive with any weight, just a simple phrase floating up from somewhere calm. You notice it the way you might notice a faint reflection in the window present, but not demanding. You let the words repeat themselves silently in your mind, matching them to your breathing. In on, this is. Out on, enough. After a few rounds, the phrase becomes less like language and more like a feeling spread through your chest, broad and steady. Your thumb idly traces the curved rim of the mug, following its circle. The ceramic feels smooth and slightly warm beneath the pad of your finger. Another inner voice, softer still, adds a few more words without trying. You're here. You're inside. Nothing else is needed tonight. It sounds like the sort of thing someone might say in a low murmur beside you, but there's no one else in the room. It's just you and the hum of the heater, the occasional tick from the cooling kettle, and the distant, patient world beyond the window. You let your gaze drift toward the glass. Your reflection looks soft around the edges, blurred by the low light and the faint moisture on the pane. Outside, the harbor lights seem to hang in the air, unmoving, as if the whole shoreline is holding its breath in the cold. The bell far out on the water offers a tone so muted that your mind almost supplies it before your ears do. Between one heartbeat and the next, you hear it, and then you don't, like the quietest of questions asked and answered in the same moment. There's a part of you that is used to listing things, tasks, worries, small obligations waiting for tomorrow. It stirs briefly, as if trying to step forward, but the rest of you gently guides it aside. Not now, you think, almost like speaking to a friend. Later. The word later isn't a promise or a delay. It's more like putting a hand on someone's shoulder and steering them toward a comfortable chair. Those thoughts can sit down somewhere over there, in the dimmer corners of the room, while you stay here with your hands around this warm cup. You shift slightly on the couch, feeling the cushions adjust beneath you, the blanket sliding into a new fold along your legs. The fabric brushes softly against your ankles, and the weight of it reminds you of how firmly the couch supports you, how solid the floor is under the rug, how rooted this little cottage feels on its foundation near the water. Another internal murmur answers, "You're held." It's a simple idea, but it fits. Held by the furniture, by the warmth, by the quiet structure of the room around you. One by one, your muscles seem to register this. The line of your shoulders softens. The back of your neck warms where it meets the cushion. The small muscles around your eyes release, even if they were barely tense to begin with. Your hands, though still cupped around the mug, feel less like they're doing something and more like they're being gently supported by the curve of the ceramic. There's a sense that you've arrived at the middle of the night's story and that the only role you have now is to rest and listen. You take another sip of tea, slow and unhurried, and listen to the faint sound of it moving in the cup. Somewhere behind you, the clock ticks on, unbothered, not asking anything of you. Your thoughts move in smaller circles now, like quiet notes, the shell you placed near the window's edge, the line of pieces along the sill, the way the map lies open on the table. Each image arises and then drifts away again, like pieces of a gentle conversation where no reply is ever needed. At some point, you realize your inner voice has stopped using full sentences. It has become more like short, steady reassurances that don't even need words. Just glows of knowing. You're safe. The house is steady. The harbor is calm under its layer of cold. The night is allowed to be long and unbroken. You listen to these wordless assurances the way you listen to the bell on the water, aware, but not analyzing, letting them sink in the way warmth seeps from the mug into your palms. When you finally set the cup down on the table once more, the sound it makes is small and familiar. You watch your own hand retreat from the handle, fingers loosening with an easy, unthinking grace. Your palms rest on your knees for a moment, feeling the weight of the blanket, the stillness of your own legs beneath it. A quiet thought settles over everything like a soft cover. You don't have to go anywhere, fix anything, or decide anything. Not for the rest of this night. And as that thought spreads through you, the room around you seems to step one shade dimmer, one notch quieter, as if it, too, is ready to settle further into the dark. Your eyes wander from the mug to the small table where the map lies open, its paper edges curling slightly upward at the corners. The lines of the harbor and the outer channels are familiar now, even if you haven't traced them often. Some part of you feels drawn to it, the way you might feel drawn to a window on a train, nothing urgent, just curiosity wrapped in calm. You ease the blanket aside and stand, feet finding the rug and then the cooler boards as you cross the room. At the table, you rest your fingertips lightly on the map's surface. The paper feels faintly textured under your skin, not fragile, but old enough to carry its own quiet history. Your thumb smooths along a crease that runs down one side, and without really meaning to, you remember the first time you unfolded it. A small shop near the harbor, its front window crowded with coiled rope, lanterns, and postcards of this same shoreline in different seasons. The air had smelled of salt and coffee and a hint of something like engine oil drifting in from the wharf. You can almost see the counter again in your mind, worn along the edge where hands had rested over many winters. Behind it, shelves had been stacked with charts and simple tools. The person there had set this particular map down with care, smoothing it just as you do now, the paper rasping softly beneath their palms. Their voice had been low and easy as they pointed out the sweep of the bay, the outer ledges, the narrow opening where small boats slip out toward deeper water. No lecture, just small comments where the fog likes to sit, where dories nestle together on their moorings, where lobster boats line up close to the pier at dawn. In the memory, light had streamed in through the shop window, picking out dust motes and the faded colors of old buoys hanging from the rafters. You remember nodding, not because you needed to navigate by these markings, but because something about the map felt right in your hands, like a way of holding the shape of the town and the water in one place. When you decided to bring it back to the cottage, it wasn't a decision that felt large. It was more like noticing that your hand had already closed around it. Now, as you stand over it again, the inked coastline rests quietly under your touch. That crease along the side is a little softer now than when you first unfolded it, as if the paper has relaxed into being here. The bay curves inward in a shape you've come to recognize from walks along the shore and glimpses from the dock. You follow the line lightly with the tip of one finger, letting it wander past the simple marks for depth and the small notes that indicate rocks and shoals. You don't need any of the numbers. It's enough to drift along the outline, remembering the feel of a wooden railing under your hand on cold mornings, or the sight of traps stacked neatly along the pier. A different memory rises, gentle and close. A morning not so long ago, bright but cold, when you walked along the edge of the water at low tide. The harbor had been quieter than usual. The sky, a pale, clear blue. Ice had crusted along the edges of the rocks, and seaweed lay in dark, glossy shapes on the wet sand. You'd heard the rattle of gear from a distant boat, seen figures in heavy jackets moving slowly along the wharf, tending to lines and crates with the same unhurried care you used tonight with the shells. On that walk, you remember pausing near a small spit of land where pieces of wood and bits of rope collect after storms. Your boots had pressed into the firm, cold sand, leaving clean impressions. You'd crouched down, gloved hands brushing aside pebbles and worn shards of shell until your fingers closed around a smooth, pale piece of driftwood. Even through the glove, you could feel that it had no sharp edges, just an easy, water-worn curve. You had turned it over once, twice, appreciating its simple, finished shape, and then slipped it into your pocket without much ceremony at all. You take a slow breath now and turn your head toward the window. The driftwood rests on the sill where you placed it earlier, the lamplight tracing a soft line along its length. For a moment you see it in 2 times at once, in your palm on that cold, bright morning down by the tide line, and now, here, inside this warm room. You move back across the floor, guided more by that overlapping feeling than by any deliberate choice. At the window, you pick it up again. It fits neatly into your hand, just as it did then. The wood has warmed a little from being inside, but it still carries a faint memory of the shore and its scent, something dry and clean that makes you think of low clouds and gulls wheeling quietly overhead. You run your thumb along its length, finding the small hollows and rises in its surface. They're familiar now, but somehow they feel new, as your tired mind discovers them again at this slower pace. Your eye falls to the row of shells you arranged earlier. They sit in their own easy rhythm along the sill, each one catching the light in a slightly different way. Without planning it, you adjust your grip on the driftwood so that it lies across your palm like a small bridge. You look at the shells, then at the wood, and a gentle idea settles in. They belong together here, pieces of the same long story written by waves and seasons. You choose a spot near the center of the line of shells and set the driftwood down so that it runs along the sill just behind them. Not in front, not overshadowing any of the small shapes, just slightly back, like a shoreline behind a row of smooth stones on the sand. Its pale curve echoes the gentle bend of the arrangement you made earlier. Under the lamplight, the grain shows more clearly now, fine lines running along its length, shading from almost white to soft gray in places. Standing there, you take in the scene, the shells in their quiet order, the piece of wood resting behind them, the faint reflection of your face in the glass above, and beyond all of that, the dark outline of boats at rest in the icy harbor. The bell sounds again in the distance, one calm note moving across the water and reaching you here. Your memory folds itself back into the present, not vanishing, just settling into the room the way the map has settled on the table, the way the driftwood has settled on the sill. You let your fingers rest lightly on the edge of the ledge for a few breaths, feeling the smooth paint under your skin. Then you step back, letting the arrangement become part of the background again. The shells, the map, the driftwood, and the quiet recollection of shop and shoreline and low-tide walks all blend into the same steady sense of place. Nothing needs to be sorted or explained. The memory has done its work simply by appearing and then easing back into the deeper quiet, like a small wave sliding up the shore and then gliding away, leaving the sand just a little smoother behind it. You stand for a while longer in front of the window, watching the way the lamplight touches the shells and the pale curve of the driftwood behind them. Outside, the harbor sits in its winter stillness, dark water and icy edges holding steady under the night. The buoy bell offers a muted note that seems to arrive from very far away, soft as breath, and then the quiet rolls back in. Your eyes follow the gentle line of shells from one side of the sill to the other. You notice a small, scalloped one that leans just slightly toward its neighbor, as if mid-step. Without really thinking about it, you reach out and nudge it a fraction of an inch, so it settles flat. The tiny adjustment makes almost no difference to the way things look, but somehow it feels like the last stroke of a pen at the end of a sentence. Done enough, your mind says quietly. You let your fingertips rest on the sill for another moment, then let them fall back to your sides. The room behind you waits, warm and easy, the map open on the table, the couch holding the shape of where you were sitting. The mug on the low table has only a faint breath of warmth left in it now. Your feet carry you back across the rug, the fibers brushing the bottoms of your socks in a soft, regular way. You pick up the cup, feeling the cooled ceramic against your palm, and for a second it feels like a small token of the evening, something that did its job and now can be gently retired. In the kitchen, the light feels a little brighter after the softer glow of the living room, though it is still mild and kind on your eyes. You set the mug in the sink. The sound, a quiet clink that echoes lightly in the basin. The faucet handle turns smoothly under your hand. Water runs, steady and clear, and you let it fill the cup, dissolving the last pale swirl of tea at the bottom. When you tilt the mug and rinse it, the cinnamon stick taps softly against the porcelain before you set it aside to throw away later. You reach for a sponge, its surface faintly cool and damp, and wipe the inside of the cup with slow, circular motions. There is no hurry. The time it takes is the time it takes. The mug comes clean, and you rinse it once more, then set it upside down on the dish rack. It joins a small plate and a spoon that were already there, a little row of washed things resting until morning. The tiny order of them is its own kind of comfort. You run the sponge lightly across the patch of counter where the mug had been, more out of habit than necessity. The surface is smooth beneath your hand, the cloth leaving a faint, clean smell behind. You turn off the faucet, The instant quiet that follows makes the hum of the refrigerator more noticeable, a low, steady presence tucked into the corner of the room. You breathe in, breathe out, feeling that the day is being gathered up piece by piece, each little task folded away. Near the stove, you touch the handle of the cooled kettle, feeling only a residual hint of earlier heat. It stands ready for some future evening, but for now its work is done. You slide it a little farther back on the burner, leaving the front of the stove clear. A small towel hangs from the oven door. You smooth it with 2 fingers, straightening the fold so its striped edge hangs neatly. It's a small, almost invisible act of care, but the room seems to respond with a soft, settled feeling. You reach for the light switch by the doorway and pause for a second, looking back over the kitchen. Counters clear, mug washed, kettle resting, jar of tea closed. Everything looks simple and expectant, as if it's prepared to sleep too. You feel a quiet gratitude for the way this small space has held you tonight, the warm water, the gentle aromas, the familiar creak of cabinet doors. Thank you, you think. Then you flip the switch. The overhead light clicks off, and the kitchen eases into dimness, lit now only by the softer glow from the living room. Shadows move into the corners, but they feel friendly, like blankets pulled up around a tired room. You step back onto the living room rug, the change underfoot a reminder that you are moving from one part of the evening to another. The lamp by the couch still casts its warm circle of light, and the open map on the small table rests within that glow. You walk over and lay your hand gently on the paper one more time. It doesn't need folding yet. It can spend the night like this, the harbor's curves and soundings resting in the quiet, keeping you company without asking for any attention. You smooth one corner and leave it, grateful for the way it ties the cottage to the water outside. You glance toward the window, where the shells and driftwood keep their calm watch over the harbor. Their shapes are clear enough in the lamplight that you don't need to step close. They belong there now, part of the room, holding a small piece of the shoreline for you while you sleep. You let your eyes rest on them just long enough to feel a gentle sense of completion, then let your gaze drift away again. On the couch, the blanket lies in a soft heap where you left it. You reach down and shake it out gently, the fabric falling in slow waves. For a moment you fold it lengthwise and lay it carefully over the back of the couch, smoothing it with the flat of your hand. It looks neat and ready for another night. Then you pause, reconsider, and pull it back down over the seat, leaving it draped loosely. Maybe you'll want it again before sleep. There's no need to tuck everything away too tightly. You check the door almost without thinking, fingers finding the cool curve of the knob, feeling the firmness of the lock. The solid weight of it reassures you, another small anchor in the quiet. Outside, the wind brushes the eaves, and a tiny rattle in the window glass answers, then stills. You turn back into the room, feeling how the warmth here has deepened, how the air feels thick with rest. Your hand finds the lamp switch. Before you reach it, you take a moment just to look around. The couch, the table, the open map, the shells, the driftwood, the tidy kitchen beyond. All of it holding you in a kind of quiet embrace. Again, that feeling of gratitude rises, simple and broad. Thank you. You think to the house, to the night, to the harbor, to the small rituals that turned hours into something soft and kind. Then you turn the switch. The lamp clicks, and the room slips into a deeper shade of darkness. Enough light spills in from the small fixture in the hallway to guide you, and a pale line from the window marks where the harbor lights reach this far. You stand for a heartbeat in the dimness, listening to the house breathe, then turn toward the hall, ready to let the night draw you even closer to rest. The hallway welcomes you with its gentle, frosted light, the fixture above softening the world into hazy outlines. Your footsteps sound quieter here, cushioned by the small runner that lines the floor. The air feels a touch cooler than the living room, which makes the warmth under your clothes more noticeable, as if your own body is wrapped in a quiet, invisible blanket. As you walk toward the bedroom, you let one hand drift along the wall. The paint is smooth beneath your fingertips, interrupted now and then by the slight dip of a nail or the faint rise of a seam between boards. Your touch is light, more of a guide than a support. Each step shortens the distance between you and the place where you will finally lie down, and with each step, your thoughts grow slower, like waves reaching shallower water. At the bathroom door, you pause and step inside. The small space is close and simple, with a mirror above the sink and a light soft enough not to startle your eyes. You turn the tap. Water runs clear and cool, and you cup your hands under the stream, feeling it gather in your palms before you raise it to your face. The chill wakes your skin just a little before the comfort follows. Droplets slide along your cheeks and jaw, tiny, tickling paths that you blot gently with a soft towel. You take your time brushing your teeth, the familiar rhythm of it almost meditative. The bristles move back and forth, steady and slow. Foam gathers and then is rinsed away. The sink makes small, hollow sounds as the water runs and recedes. When you finish, you set the toothbrush back in its place and look at your reflection not to study it, just to acknowledge it. Your features seem a bit softer in the dim light, edges less sharp, eyes a little heavier but more peaceful. You don't need to say anything to yourself. The quiet between you and the mirror is enough. You flick off the bathroom light, and the hallway's glow returns to being the main guide. The bedroom door waits just ahead, slightly open. You nudge it with your fingertips, and it swings inward with a gentle hush. The room greets you in muted tones. The bedside lamp off, the only illumination coming from the hall, and a faint spill of light that creeps in around the window shade from the harbor outside. The bed sits against the far wall, quilt spread smooth, pillows stacked in an inviting, soft slope. The shapes are familiar, even in low light. The quilt's pattern, a mix of quiet colors and repeated blocks, looks like a calm, slow rhythm. You step closer and rest your hand on it. The fabric is cool at first touch, but the padding beneath suggests the warmth that will soon rise as you lie there. You move around the room with small, careful motions. If there are clothes laid over a chair, you fold them loosely and set them aside. Shoes, if any remain, are nudged into a simple pair near the wall. The top of the dresser is already tidy, a small dish, perhaps for jewelry or change, a folded handkerchief, a book resting with its cover up. You don't need anything from there tonight. Everything you truly need is already here. A quiet room, a warm bed, the steady breath moving in your chest. At the window, you lift the shade just enough to peer out. The glass is cold, and your fingertips sense the temperature radiating through. Outside, the harbor lies still beneath the winter sky. Lights from the docks and houses cluster along the water's edge, their reflections trembling slightly on the surface. You can't hear much from here, only the faintest hint of the buoy bell if you listen closely, and the muffled whisper of wind moving along clapboard walls and over cedar shingles. For a moment, you consider cracking the window, just a little, to let in the sharp night air. But even imagining the chill reminds you of how low the temperature has dipped, how the edges of the harbor are rimmed with ice. You decide to leave the window closed, trusting the pane to keep the deepest cold on the other side. The room is cool enough as it is, a good kind of cool that will make the bed feel all the more welcoming. You lower the shade again, leaving just a thin line at the bottom where a sliver of harbor light can brush the floor. Then you turn to the small bedside lamp. The switch clicks under your fingers. Warm light spreads softly across the quilt and up the wall, pushing the shadows back just enough. This is the last pool of brightness you will stand in tonight, and you savor it the way you might savor the last few notes of a lullaby. You sit on the edge of the bed. The mattress gives a little under your weight, cradling your legs and hips. Your feet rest on the floor, toes sensing the cool surface through the fabric of your socks. You place your hands beside you, palms pressing gently into the quilt, and let your shoulders drop. The air here feels still, like a held breath, but not tense, just waiting for you to settle in fully. When you're ready, you swing your legs up and over, turning so that you can slide under the covers. The quilt lifts and falls in a slow wave as you draw it back, then pull it up over your legs, your hips, your middle, your chest. The sheets beneath are smooth and carry that faint, clean scent of laundry and winter air. As you settle, warmth begins to bloom wherever your body touches fabric, spreading gradually out from your core. Your head finds the pillow with an ease that feels almost inevitable. The softness gathers around the back of your skull, supporting your neck, the side of your face. You give a small, instinctive wiggle to find just the right spot, then still. The sound of your own breath becomes clearer here. Each inhale, a soft draw, each exhale, a gentle sigh. The quilt feels pleasantly heavy across you, like a quiet hand resting over your middle, reminding you that you are covered, sheltered. You reach out and rest your fingers lightly on the edge of the quilt, or perhaps on the cool wooden rail of the headboard. All around you, the room holds its shape in the dim light from the lamp. The door, slightly ajar, shows a narrow strip of hallway. Beyond that, the rest of the cottage rests. The living room, with its shells and driftwood on the sill, the open map on the table, the sink with the washed mug, the little kitchen settling into its own sleep. When you feel ready, you turn your head slightly toward the lamp and let your hand find the switch. You pause there, not out of hesitation, but simply to feel this moment the last one before the room dims to almost nothing. You take in a slow breath, hold it gently for a heartbeat, and let it go. Then, with a soft click, you turn the light off. Darkness settles like a soft blanket, thick but not oppressive. The thin line of harbor light at the bottom of the shade is enough to give the room a faint outline, the curve of the quilt over your body, the shadow of the chair, the rectangle of the door. Your eyes adjust. Then, heavy. You can hear the faint murmur of the heating system, the distant bell when it happens to sound, the quietest suggestion of wind at the eaves. You don't need to move anymore. Your body has found its place. Your thoughts drift more slowly now, like small boats tied at their moorings, rocking gently in the dark, icy harbor. The quilt's weight, the pillow's softness, the steady rhythm of your breath, all of it combines into one long, unbroken feeling of rest. You let yourself sink into it, deeper and quieter, as the night gathers around the cottage and holds you in its calm, winter embrace. In the darkness, sound becomes a kind of gentle lantern. You lie still, quilt holding your weight, and let your awareness drift outward and then back again, like a slow tide against shore. The room is mostly shapes and suggestion now, but that feels right. You know where everything is without needing to see it. Bed, door, hall, living room beyond, harbor outside. Each one a quiet point on the map of this night. You listen first to your own breathing. It moves in an easy, unhurried rhythm. In, out. The air is cool in your nose, warmer where it leaves your lips. The quilt keeps your middle soft and steady, your legs heavy and warm, your shoulders supported by the mattress. Every exhale feels a little longer than the one before, stretching out like a line of foam on wet sand, losing shape, becoming part of everything else. From farther away, another rhythm reaches you, the muted hum and sigh of the heating system. It comes on in a low, steady murmur, holds for a while, then falls quiet again. In those pauses, the rest of the cottage can be heard more clearly or almost heard, as if your mind fills in the silence with familiar things. The slight tick of the cooling stove, the settled hush of the living room, the faint memory of the kettle's earlier rumble. Beyond the walls, the harbor keeps its slower, older time. You can't see it now, but the images come easily anyway. Dark water, thick with cold, moving in broad, patient swells. The edges where it meets stone and piling have stiffened into delicate skins of ice. When the tide shifts, those thin sheets crackle and shift, giving off small, crystalline sounds that carry lightly across the night. Above, the sky is a deep, quiet black, the kind that holds a few clear stars like distant lanterns over the bay. Somewhere out there, the buoy bell moves with the motion of the water. Now and then, when swell and wind line up just so, it offers a single, rounded tone. You hear one of those notes now, softened by distance and clapboard and winter air. It comes to you as a simple presence rather than a call, just a small, assured sound that says, the markers are still there, the channels still kept, the harbor still watching over itself while the town sleeps. Your thoughts float out over the water and drift gently along the wharf. You imagine the row of small boats resting at their moorings, dories rocking lightly, their bows lifting and settling with each slow swell. Lines stretch from cleats to rings, slack but sure, holding everything in place. Lobster boats sleep at their berths, gear stacked in quiet heaps on deck, traps waiting in neat rows along the pier. In the dim light of a distant street lamp, The ropes and railings are edged with frost, every surface crisp and still. From there, your mind glides up toward the street above the waterline. Clapboard cottages stand shoulder to shoulder against the cold, their cedar shingles darkened by winter damp. A few windows hold squares of soft light. Most are dark now, rooms folded into themselves for the night. Snowbanks line the narrow road, pushed to the sides and edged with a thin crust that glitters under occasional passing headlights. Chimneys hold the last warmth of earlier fires, but now even the smoke has thinned to almost nothing. Then your attention returns to the cottage you're in, to its own small harbor of rooms. You picture the living room as it must look now in the near dark. The couch resting in shadow. The lamp still and quiet. The low table with its washed cup drying in the kitchen beyond. The open chart on the small table, lines and soundings turned into pale shapes in the dimness. It lies there like a shore seen from far offshore familiar, but blurred by distance and night. Your mind moves closer to it, not to study it, but to see what has changed simply because the day is over. Earlier, your fingertips smoothed its creases. Now, in your imagination, it has settled even flatter, as if the paper has exhaled at last. The inked harbor curves still across it, but you no longer feel the need to trace those lines. Instead, the whole chart seems to become a single, gentle feeling, that of knowing where you are held on this coastline, tucked between water and land in a safe, sheltered pocket. The image shifts softly to the window, to the sill where shells and driftwood keep their quiet vigil. You see it as it would appear under the faint light that slips in from outside, the row of small shells, pale and curved, casting tiny shadows on the painted wood, the piece of driftwood resting just behind them, its grain darker now, its shape a little more mysterious in the half-light. Earlier, it felt like something you had brought in from the tide line. Now, in your mind, it feels like something that has chosen to stay. You picture the driftwood not only as a found object, but as a kind of small, gentle keel for this room. It lies behind the shells the way a sturdy hull lies beneath a boat, silent but supportive. It doesn't need to move. Its presence is enough. The shells, which you arranged with patient hands, seem to lean into that quiet strength, their line along the sill echoing the curve of the shore outside. Together, they feel less like decoration and more like a soft, wordless promise that the sea and the house and your resting body all belong to the same calm night. In this half-dream state, the map on the table and the driftwood on the sill seem linked. One holds the harbor in lines and ink, flattened and spread open. The other holds the harbor in shape and texture, worn by water and time. In your thoughts, they drift a little closer together, as if the map's drawn coastline and the wood's curved grain are two ways of saying the same thing. You are here, in this sheltered place, under this winter sky, in this bed, exactly where you're meant to be. As your breathing slows further, those images start to loosen their edges. The chart becomes only a soft rectangle of calm. The driftwood becomes a small, smooth weight of comfort resting in the house's memory. The shells are just pale, gentle marks along a ledge. The buoy bell is a tone that may or may not sound again before you sleep. Everything, including the anchors that walked with you through this evening, settles into the same steady rest, keeping you company without needing to be seen. Now there is mostly darkness, and the steady warmth gathered around you. The quilt holds your shape, gentle and sure. The mattress cradles your weight. The pillow supports the curve of your neck and the back of your head, offering nowhere to go but down into softness. Your hands rest where they have chosen to rest on the quilt, at your sides, near your middle still, easy. Breath moves in and out, quieter now, almost matching the faint hush of winter wind at the eaves. In, a coolness that reminds you of the icy harbor beyond the glass. Out, a warmth that belongs wholly to you, filling the small space beneath the covers, mingling with the calm air of the room. Each exhale stretches a little longer, a little lighter, like a line of tide smoothing out the sand. Somewhere in the cottage, boards rest against beams. Shells rest on the sill. The small piece of driftwood rests behind them. The old chart rests on the table. All the small companions of this night have found their places, just as you have found yours. Nothing is waiting to be done. Nothing is waiting to be decided. The house and the harbor and your own body are joined in one quiet agreement. You float in that understanding, scarcely needing thoughts at all. Only warmth. Only stillness. Only the soft rhythm of your breathing, moving through the dark like a slow, kind wave. Held by the bed, by the room, by the winter night around you, you let go a little more, and then a little more, until even the act of letting go softens into a simple, effortless rest, like a final, gentle exhale that keeps on going, carrying you deeper into sleep.